What is up, everyone, and welcome back to 60-Second Nightmare. The world is full of dark, unexplored corners, places that have remained untouched by sunlight for millennia. Today, we're plunging into that abyss to recount three of the most harrowing caving disasters ever recorded. These are tales of courage pushed to its absolute limit, of the razor-thin line between adventure and tragedy, and of the chilling mysteries that lurk deep within the earth. So take a deep breath, because where we're going, there isn't much air to spare. Our first story takes us to the icy heart of Norway on February 6, 2014. A team of 5 elite Finnish cave divers prepared to conquer the Plura Cave system, a treacherous underwater labyrinth. Their plan was ambitious, to be one of the very few to ever complete a full traverse, entering one submerged opening and exiting another. Among them was 46-year-old Kai Kankinen. For Kai, this dive was deeply personal. Just a year earlier, he had lost his close friend and longtime diving partner in a similar expedition. He knew the risks better than anyone, the unforgiving nature of the deep. Yet, here he was, drawn back to the darkness, perhaps to face the very fears that haunted him. He was joined by 4 other experts: Patrick Gronquist, Jari Hutarinen, Jari Uusimäki, and the youngest, Vesa Rantanen. The Plura system is not for the faint of heart. It is the deepest known cave in northern Europe, a maze of passages plunging over 130 meters into pitch-black, freezing water. The route was newly discovered, meaning information was scarce and the margin for error was non-existent. A single tear in a dry suit, a malfunctioning piece of equipment, or one wrong turn meant a slow, lonely death in the crushing cold. The team split in 2. Jerry H. and Patrick went first, using underwater scooters to conserve energy. Kai, Jari Uusimäki, and Vesa would follow 2 hours later, allowing the silt kicked up by the first pair to settle, ensuring clear visibility. Initially, the dive went smoothly. They descended through the frigid water, navigating the initial 500 meters with professional ease. They reached a large air-filled chamber, a brief sanctuary where they could rest before the most challenging part of the journey. For a fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to believe the mission might actually be this effortless. They couldn't have been more wrong. Further down, they reached the deepest part of the cave, a shockingly narrow section with a sharp, difficult turn. A fully geared diver could barely squeeze through. Patrick decided to lead the way, but as he prepared to navigate the turn, he saw Jerry H.'s flashlight begin to flash erratically behind him. He turned back and saw his friend in a state of pure panic. One of Jerry H.'s bailout cylinders had become snagged on a rock, trapping him. At this depth, panic is a death sentence. It accelerates breathing, consumes precious air, and clouds judgment. Patrick tried to calm him down, but the space was too tight to maneuver effectively. He let go of his own scooter and carefully swam back, managing to shift the trap cylinder and free his friend. But when he swam back to check on him, the situation had spiraled into something far worse. Somehow, in the struggle, Jerry's breathing regulator had come out of his mouth. Patrick shoved it back in as fast as he could, but the damage was done. It was already too late. Jerry's lungs were filled with water. His life was extinguished in the silent, indifferent deep. Patrick was now alone, 130 meters below the surface, with the lifeless body of his friend floating before him. He wanted to scream, but there was no air to waste. He had to stay calm, or he would be the next victim. He checked his dive computer. The screen flashed a horrifying number: 400 minutes. The time he would need to spend decompressing on his way back to the surface had quadrupled. Every second he lingered here, that number would climb. With a heavy heart, Patrick turned away from his friend and began his solitary journey toward the second entrance, a ghost in the abyss. What he didn't realize was that the second team was swimming directly into the nightmare he was leaving behind. 2 hours later, Vesa, Jerry U, and Kai descended into the same section. Vesa was in the lead when he heard the faint, urgent beeping of a distress signal. Fearing the worst, he pushed forward, only to be greeted by the very outcome he was dreading. There, blocking the narrow tunnel ahead, was the body of Jerry H. Before Vesa could even process the horror, Jerry U, swimming just behind him, saw the same tragic scene and lost his composure. He began to panic. Kai, the last diver in their group, rushed to help, trying desperately to calm Jerry U down, but it was useless. Underwater panic is a swift and merciless killer. Jerry's breathing became erratic, and within minutes, the Plura Cave claimed its second life. Now Kai saw Vesa ahead, kicking violently, trying to force his way past Jerry H's body. He urged him to stop, to turn back, but Vesa refused. Left with an impossible choice, Kai decided to retreat the way he came, alone, convinced that Vesa would soon become the third casualty. But by some miracle, Vesa managed to squeeze through. Now 3 men were swimming alone, separated by darkness and rock, each believing he was the sole survivor of a mission gone horribly wrong. After an agonizing 8.5 hours, Patrick was the first to break the surface, emerging into the night air around 9 p.m. An hour later, Vesa appeared. On the other side of the mountain, Kai clawed his way through the ice of the entrance pond at 1:30 a.m. He dragged himself to the team's van and waited, holding onto a sliver of hope. He didn't have to wait long. At 2 a.m., Patrick and Vesa arrived, marking the end of their horrific journey. 2 of their friends were gone, but 3 had survived the unforgiving depths of Plura. But as terrifying as Plura was, it was far from the only cave to test the limits of human endurance. 4 years later, a descent into the world's deepest cave would turn into a struggle that made the Plura disaster look almost merciful. Welcome to Veryovkina Cave in Abkhazia, a chasm that plunges over 2,200 meters into the earth. Fewer people have reached its bottom than have been to space. In September 2018, a team of Russian cavers led by the legendary Pavel Demidov prepared for their second descent. They had already conquered it once, but this time they were joined by British cave photographer Robbie Schoen and his assistant Jeff Wade. Their mission: to photograph its otherworldly terrain and collect specimens of life that existed in total darkness. Exploring this cave is a monumental undertaking. Each caver had to haul over 60 pounds of gear while wrapped in layers of thermal clothing to survive the near-freezing cold. The descent was brutal. To even enter, they had to lower themselves through a vertical shaft, dropping 32 meters straight down. From there, it was thousands of narrow, twisting tunnels. This is not a one-day trip. Previous cavers had established 6 underground camps, Spartan outposts where explorers could dry off, eat, and mentally prepare for the next leg. It took Pavel's team 4 days of brutal climbing and crawling just to reach the deepest camp. They spent the first 6 days at the bottom exploring a surreal turquoise lake and collecting specimens. The mission was a success, but on day 7 their peaceful exploration came to a sudden, crashing halt. 2 of Pavel's team members, who had started their ascent a day earlier, sent a frantic message down the emergency cable line. A deafening roar had echoed through the cave, followed by a flash flood. At the bottom, the team was concerned, but not panicked. Flood pulses were common in deep caves and usually passed quickly. They were tragically mistaken. Shortly after, seething water exploded from a chasm just meters from their camp. It wasn't a trickle, it was a torrent, and it was rising fast. They had waited too long. The entire chamber was about to be submerged. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Robbie Schoen sprang into action. He quickly suited up, clipped himself to the rope leading out of the camp, and began to climb. The ascent was a nightmare. The passages they had carefully navigated on the way down were now raging waterfalls. The water pressure was so strong it was a struggle just to breathe. But Robbie knew he was in the lead. If he failed, everyone behind him would be trapped. After hours of struggle, he reached a relatively dry section where the water had diverted down another path. He was exhausted, but alive. A few minutes later, to his relief, Jeff Wade appeared behind him. He'd been following just behind Robbie the entire time. They were safe for now, but they had no idea if the 5 Russian cavers had made it out of the flooded camp below. There was no time to wait. The water was still rising. After another several hours of a slow, excruciating climb, they reached the next camp up, at 1,900 meters deep. Then they saw it, the flicker of headlamps in the distance. To their astonishment, the 5 Russian cavers emerged from the darkness. They too had barely escaped the flood. The entire team was now trapped in a small, damp camp almost 2 kilometers beneath the surface as a subterranean river raged around them. For 20 long hours they waited. Then they noticed the water was starting to recede. It was the signal they needed. They began their final ascent, a 4-day journey of walking and climbing, finally emerging into the sunlight, having survived the impossible. While the threats in these caves were tangible forces of nature, the dangers faced by our next explorer were far more mysterious and possibly supernatural. Our final tale is an early internet legend that began in 2001 when a man known only as Ted the Caver started a blog detailing his experience with a bizarre cave. In his first entry, Ted described an expedition with his friend B. Deep inside a remote cave, they discovered something strange. A narrow hole just a few inches wide with a steady howling wind blowing from it. The mystery was irresistible. What lay on the other side? They decided to find out. Over several trips, they painstakingly worked to widen the hole. And that's when things started to get weird. The howling from the hole grew louder, and it was now accompanied by a deep, rumbling sound they couldn't explain. On one trip, they brought B's dog, who became agitated and refused to go anywhere near the work site. Then they heard it. A distinct grinding sound, like rock scraping against rock, coming from deep within the tunnel. And then a sound that chilled them to the bone, a loud, screeching scream echoing from the hole. Terrified, but more determined than ever, they finally widened the opening just enough for Ted to squeeze through. The passage was incredibly tight, his arms pinned to his sides. On the other side, he found a surprisingly roomy chamber. Leaning against one wall was a large, perfectly round stone, far too smooth to be natural. Near it, he saw strange, hieroglyph-like markings on the wall, depicting a group of people surrounding a mysterious symbol. Now more confused than ever, they returned with another friend, Joe, to investigate. Joe went into the tunnel alone. He was gone for far longer than the trip should have taken. When he finally emerged, he was pale and shaking. When they asked what happened, he only said, "I don't feel good," and walked out of the cave, never speaking to them again. What could he have possibly seen? Ted and B had to know. They returned one last time, armed with a camcorder and a two-way cable phone. Ted went in alone. As he was exploring the chamber, he heard the grinding noise again. Startled, he slammed his head on the ceiling, breaking his headlamp and plunging him into darkness. He reached for the phone to call B. The line was dead. He fumbled for a glow stick, his heart pounding, dreading what its green light might reveal. He cracked it. The room was empty. But then he noticed the round stone. It had moved. It was now sitting directly on top of the phone wire, severing it. But who or what had moved it? That's when he felt something crawling behind him. He didn't dare look back. He scrambled for the exit, a putrid, rotting stench pouring into the passage behind him. He burst out of the hole, gasping for air, just as he and B heard the scraping sounds from inside once again. They ran for the cave's exit. As they were climbing the final rope out, something began to pull it back down into the darkness. In a panic, B pulled out his knife and cut the rope, sending it falling into the abyss below as they escaped. A few weeks later, Ted posted a final update to his blog. It read, "For my family and friends who are reading this, I say, be at peace. I will conquer this cave. Then I will return and update this website immediately. I will include any photos we take in the cave today. I expect to be home later tonight or tomorrow at the latest. See all of you soon with a lot of answers. Love, Ted." That was the last thing anyone ever heard from Ted. His story became a phenomenon. For 2 decades, people debated what happened in that cave. Was it a demon? A portal to another world? The theories were endless. And then the truth was revealed. The YouTube channel Nick Crowley found and interviewed the real Ted. And as it turned out, most of it was fake. While Ted and B really did explore a creepy cave, the howling hole, the moving stone, and the supernatural creature were all brilliant pieces of fiction, created simply to tell a chilling story. True or not, it remains one of the most unforgettable tales of horror to ever grace the web. From the crushing pressure of flooded tunnels to the imagined horrors of a dark passage, the call of the unknown is a powerful force. If you found these stories as chilling as we did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to 60-Second Nightmare for more tales from the edge of fear. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And let us know in the comments below which of these caving nightmares will be keeping you up at night. Until next time, stay safe